So over the last year, I've been reading a lot on Kindle, and recently I've discovered a service which is called Readwise. I think some of you guys might already know it, but basically what it does, it turns thousands of hours of high quality highlights that I've been doing and bits of value knowledge that I have highlighted over the years into daily active recall activities. Like they send emails every day to you. I'm not sure if they have here an example. Yeah, you receive emails like this on your mail every day with quotes that you have highlighted, and I think it's pretty awesome. And of course, this is a paid tool. This is not free. You can get a free start trial, but then you have to pay for it. So, of course, as any software engineer would do, I've decided to not buy the service. Instead, to which I think you can go ahead and buy it. I think it's worth it for the value that you get, but I think it's way more fun and cheaper to build it ourselves. I've built this service around 3 months ago, and it has been costing me around 40 cents per month, which is pretty reasonable according to the price that you'd be paying for the full service, for the Readwise, of course. But the main advantage is that I can share. I'm not sure if Readwise can do this, but I can share my highlights with friends and even my girlfriend. So the books that she reads, I'm syncing with my own highlights. And yeah, you can just build all these kind of features that you couldn't on these tools, and you are basically not paying. So I think it's awesome. And I've decided to make this video to show you guys a simple version of how you can achieve this very quick. So if you want such a service and save about €7 a month, and build a cool project in the meanwhile, and even learn something new, we're going to build this in Golang from scratch, then let's get started. So this is pretty much what you're going to be building. I'm going to leave this to you to deploy and how you want to deploy this or set up, because this is how I did it. It's very specific for Google Cloud, but if you are on Amazon or something like that, there's tools for that as well. So I have here a scheduler that runs every day at 8:30 and calls an endpoint that I have on the API that you're going to be building. And then I have it set up on Cloud Run, which is a serverless solution that Google provides. It is very cheap, so it puts the service on, it runs the code. Then after the execution is stopped, so when there's no traffic, it just shuts down. So I'm not paying for it. That's the main advantage for it, in my opinion. And then, of course, here I have a Docker image. We're going to Dockerize our application and send it to Cloud Run, and then it's done, basically. How it's going to work behind the scenes is that we are going to have a database where we get random highlights. So we're going to parse your Kindle highlight files. So it would be something like this on a different process. So you'd have like Kindle files. You can get this. I'm going to show you how you can get these Kindle highlights. And then we are going to basically send this to our endpoint, and we are going to have some highlights. It's going to parse, it's going to create all the data, and then it's going to send to the databases. So if you have a new book, it's going to create the book, the highlights, and all of that automatically. Then this is a different process, which is whenever the schedule calls, it composes an email from a template and then sends to all the subscribers, which can be a list of users, whatever, and then they receive the email pretty fast. So this is what you're going to be building. Regarding data, this is pretty much what I have come up with, so you can change this as you want. All right, so here I have just a main function and a main.go file, and let's get started building this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize this, go mod init. I'm going to call this with my handle, I think. And I'm going to call this notebase. That's the name of the project that I did before. Okay, so we got it. So the first thing that we need to do actually is we can start it by creating the HTTP server and setting up the endpoints. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and create an API.go. And I'm going to have this on the main. So most of the things I'm going to be built, pretty much anything, I think it's going to be on the level main. Let's keep this simple and not overcomplicate this. Then after the project is working, we can do whatever we want with it. I think that's a good philosophy to get started. So the first thing is, let's create a structure called API server. For now, it's going to have another. It's going to be the address of the server, for example, parse 3000. And then let's create a constructor and just return the other as well. So another thing that I usually like to do is to create a function called run, which basically starts anything related to the API. So we call, what's going to happen here in the main is that you have the API server. You get new API server on port 3000, of course. And then you just call run. And this is pretty much it. And if you have any dependency injection, you do it here on the run and not on the main. Also here, we can do is database initializing, all of that. So you have a pretty slim main file. This is what I usually like to do. So let's have a router. For this, I'm going to go with mux router, grow a little mux, just so we can move a bit faster. And if we need to do parsing, which I think we need to do, this is way convenient than the standard package. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sub router for this, yeah. So I can prefix API and /v1. And then I'm just going to return log.fatal. If something was wrong on the listen, this will panic, basically. So this is the basic structure, and then here we can just add endpoints like this. For example, in this case, we're going to have one endpoint, which is to parse the Kindle file, so parse Kindle file. And then we're going to have another endpoint, we're just going to have two for now, which is to sense the daily highlights, the daily insights, I'm going to call this. It's fancier. From the cloud environments, basically. I think it is going to be the structure. So this first endpoint, parsing the Kindle file, because when we parse the file, we're going to create entities. We're going to create highlights, and the highlights are linked to the user, as we saw here. A highlight is from someone, so we need to have a user somewhere in the request. And then what we can do is basically, what can we call this? Parse Kindle file, something like this. Yeah. So instead of putting it here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna move this to another file. I'm gonna create a file called service.go, and this is where all of the business logic is going to live, pretty much. I'm gonna put this on a function register routes, basically. And what's gonna happen is that it's going to receive a router, which is gonna be the mux router. And it's basically just responsible for setting up this route. So I'm gonna put router. I can delete these comments. Let's just call this handle parse Kindle file. And it's going to be a post. I think it makes sense. Then I'm going to copy paste and change this to be clouds/send, or just daily insight. I'm going to put it send because it's going to be an action. Send daily insights. And I have prefixed cloud because it's going to be triggered by a cloud environment, has a webhook. So we know that this is going to be authenticated with, basically we're going to implement maybe some sort of API key so that the cloud environment can call this, but not authenticated client cannot do it, because this is going to generate costs on the client, on the cloud environment. So we want to protect this one. I'm going to call this handle sends daily insights, of course. It's going to be a post. Actually, I'm gonna keep it as a get, although I'll definitely put this as a post, but we can change this in the future. But I'm not sure if... Yeah, I probably can though, but let's keep it as a get. So this is it. But first we need to create a struct for the service, because the service is going to be something that we initialize it. So it's going to be type struct. And this is the dependencies that you just inject here, so you can just easily test. It's going to be a very nice structure that I usually do. So before we start actually building the endpoints, I want to show you how you actually get an export. So you can do this multiple ways. You can even go to your Kindle and extract the clippings.file. That works. A way I like to do this, and I think this can be automated, which is use this book decision tool, which is actually made from the guys at Readwise. So this is probably how they did it before. But the way you do it is you drag this to the browser's bookmark, and then you go to the Kindle platform, and then just click it, and it's going to generate you JSON or whatever you want, something like this. So I'm gonna leave the links in the description so you can get these tools. We just drag this to the top of the bookmark, and then what you can do is click on it here. So I have it, where is it? Book decision. And I'm basically going to get the export. Oh, it got me an error. Let me see what's happening. Try again. I think I've tried one before and I canceled, so I think that's probably why it failed. And here we go. You can copy, download. I'm gonna hit download as JSON. And this is what it looks like. Open. It's a bunch of JBRE, so let me just format this real quick. And there we go. So this is a bunch of highlights of this book that I've read. And as you can see the structure, you have an idea of the book, the title, authors. So this is the book structure data. And then this is just a huge array of highlights that we're going to create into actual entries in the database. So here you have the text, if it's a note only, the location, if it had a note. So we can see ones with notes, which are strings. You can see this. And this is pretty much it. All right, so back here in the function, let's go ahead and start by parsing the variables. For example, GitHub Copilot is reading my mind, so this is what you're gonna do. We get the user ID from the request. Then we can handle the error here, but I'm just gonna move forward with that. The next thing we need to do is actually parse the file, get the file from the request first, and then parse it. To get the file, I think I'm getting the file from a form file. So on the request, you pass it as a form file. For that, what we can do is there is the form file, yeah, something like this. It can be this. What do we get from here? We get the file. So let's just call this file. And I think we can ignore this and just get the error. And then we handle the error. I'm going to create, let me just defer and close the file, so I don't forget. And what I'm gonna do, it's because we're gonna send JSON has the request response, even the errors. So I'm going to create an utils.go, and here I'm going to create a function that I usually like to create, which is called writes JSON or something like that. So the idea is that it's just writes JSON, puts the header and all of that, and it's going to receive the http.response writer and the status, for example. And then we can just send any, which could be a message, a string, whatever. So the first thing that we need to do is set the header as JSON. Then we write the header, and then we do a JSON.new encoder, and then we encode whatever it sends. This is pretty much it. Then here I do this, and I say that's a bad request, and then I just say error parsing file, for example. And here we can return the execution of the function. So by this moment we have a multi-part file. Now we need to somewhere create a function that is going to parse that multi-part file. So let's create it. I'm going to leave this here. So I've said this is going to be the place where you have business logic. So parse Kindle file. I think this is file Kindle extract file, something like this. And it's going to receive a multiparts dot file. And what we can return, we're going to have to create a type for this in a bit. But for now, this is what you're going to do. Actually, we can just go ahead and create a types.go package main. This is going to be, what can we call this? Raw extract book. So this is going to be basically where you're going to get this type and map this JSON structure to it. So that's why I've called it raw. And then from the raw extract, we're going to actually create the data and the entities from it on the database layer. This can be, so if you think about this, this is going to be everything that is here. So it's going to be the ASIN, just like this. And we have the JSON structure here, so we can have this uppercase and then this lowercase. We have the title. We have the authors. I think it's in a plural as well, yeah. And then we have the highlights, which we have to create a new type for it as well. Is there a typo here? Yeah, it is a typo. And this is going to be basically texts. So we're going to have the texts. We have the location. I don't want this one. I think we can ignore it. I don't think we want this, but let's write anyways. Is not, we're probably not going to consume that. We have location. Location, what we can do is anonymous struct, because I'm not going to use this for now. I think let's just do it value URL. Yeah, it's a URL and a value. And then the JSON is going to be a location. So this can go. And then we have isNote only. Yeah, and then we have the notes, which is a string, just like this. Is okay, this one, it doesn't exist. Okay, so we have the raw extract book here. Let's just put it as a return. It's going to be a pointer, and then we also return an error if we find an error as well. Then how are we going to do this? Let's use a JSON.decode. So we're going to decode JSON.decode, new decoder, right? And then we just pass the file. It's an IO reader as well. And here we have the decoder. Then what we do is, let me just, yeah, I'm going to call this raw, and then I'm just going to say raw extract booked. And then let's do the decoding. So if error, this is pretty straightforward already. Decoder decode raw. If there's an error, we return nil error, and then at the end we just return the raw or nil. And this is it. So let's go ahead here. Let's get the raw. Like this. If we have an error, we return something. By request error parsing file. Sounds good to me. And then the next step that we need to do is, of course, has GitHub said here, we need to save to the database, which means that we need to create data from the raw book. And that is just the name of the function that we can create. So what I'm going to do is actually going to be a service method. Since we have the service, let's just use this. and let's call this create data from raw book, right? And then it receives a raw. It's a raw extract, and just created here a bunch of stuff. Let's go slowly, and this is going to receive the raw extract book, and then this is the return. The return, we need to check it in a bit. For now, let's keep it an error. This is right. Do we need a store, or don't we? Now we can use the store from the service, and here we just say user ID because we need the user ID for this case. Let's just keep it a string. So here on the store, we need to set up a new getter, a new constructor. Let's do this. And since we're here, let's add the only dependency that the storage needs, which without it, it doesn't even make sense, right? Which is the database layer. So let's do a db, or it's a db, sql.db. And then here on the constructor, we actually need the db, sql.db, and just pass it here. So with this, we have a way to initialize our store on the main file. Let's call this store, and then we need a db layer as well. Okay, for that, how can we handle this? So we need some sort of initialization of the database. What I'm going to do is, on the beginning, we add this address here. We can do is actually add another dependency here, like this, and then just say s.db. There we go. Pass the store to the service. So it's still throwing an error here because this storage does not implement the interface that it requires. So it doesn't have any of these methods. And here on the service, we require the interface to be there, right? But it doesn't implement the methods yet. So let's go ahead and actually just create empty versions. And the error just went away. So that's a good sign. What we need to do then is get this dependency in on the main file. So when we wrote at the start db initialization, let's do this here. So what we need for that is we need to go ahead and actually I'm going to create a file called db.go. And inside here, let's of course do the same pattern, which is have some sort of storage, which I'm going to call MySQL. It's going to be my implementation. This could be better implemented, better abstracted, but this is going to work fine. And then let's have a constructor like so. And inside here, it's actually going to be, I'm going to do it inside here, which is create the actual connection. So for that, we need to do very straightforward. If I have done this before, sql.open, we open a connection. It's going to be MySQL. And here we can send, for example, configuration. And this configuration is going to be sent. This is wrong. That's not going to happen. Yeah, like this. And what we're going to send is config, right? And it's going to be MySQL.config. I think this exists. Yeah, this is a driver. Let's just create this import like this. So it initializes. We can also get the name as well. And then what we do is, let me see if I remember, I think it's format. Yeah, this one, format, like this. We need to handle this error, pretty important. I just messed up here. And then I'm just gonna log .fatal, to be honest. Not much we can do if the database is not connected, right? And then to actually do the connection in Go, we need to actually ping it. There you go. If there's an error pinging, let's do the same. This is critical that we just throw the application and we know that it should not work. And let's have here a log for connected. We know that it's connected. And then we need to return an error, right? Yeah, we can return an error and then the instance as well. So I don't have an error. And nil, why did I put nil here? Actually, no. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it like this because we're handling the errors with fatals. I think it's fine. You could leave this to the layer above, but I'm just gonna keep it here. So gonna have MySQL. So it's gonna be the DB. And then we need to have a configuration here. Let's create this configuration on the main file. So what we can do is just put here config, MySQL config, and for example, we can go to the environment variables and set it up from there, but I'm gonna be lazy and just do this. So I have a Docker container running on my machine with the MySQL image, and this is the data that I have. So if you get to production, we need to change this, but this is just for education purpose. So if you want to deploy this, put here environment variable values that can be injected in runtime, right, or in build time. So the other is going to be localhost, like this. I think you can need to check that a bit. So the database name, I already have it created here, which is called Highlights. And then yeah, I can leave this true. I'm not sure about that. So I have one property which is parse time. Then we have the config as injected here, and there we go. So we have the database, and then we can just send the database here. It's not still receiving. We need to add it to the constructor db sql.db db. There we go. MySQL storage. Yeah, it's MySQL storage. Sorry about that. MySQL storage. Okay, never mind. Let me just roll back this. Yeah, this is correct. I just forget that we actually need here to initialize the database, because what we got is an instance of the structure that we created, right? This makes sense. So we actually, I'm gonna call this storage, and this is gonna be actually the database pointer. It's gonna be storage dot init. Is it storage dot? Yeah, so storage dot init. We're gonna create this in a bit. So let's just handle the error, panic, or better yet, the log.fatal. And let's go inside again the package, the DB, and then here we are going to create the init. So this is going to do a couple of things. First, it creating the tables. So there's tables that we need to create, which is those three tables: the book, the highlight, and the user. We need to create those tables here. So initialize table, the tables, and then we can just return the s.db here at the end, right? And you need an error as well, right? If we go back, this is working. We get the DB, which is the SQL instance. We passing it through, and here we have all the dependencies being nicely injected and easily testable for the application. This is wrong. Import here. This is the log from standard package. I'm not sure why it's even imported that one though. So yeah, what we need to do. Let's initialize the tables so we have the structure in our machine. I'm gonna have a method for each one. Something like this, yeah. So the MySQL storage, I'm gonna have this one. So here what we need to do is just run a huge SQL statement. I'm not gonna use no GORM, no ORM. It's gonna be just straight up SQL as it should be. Something around the lines of this. So if the table does not exist, let's create this, the books. I'm gonna keep it in the plural. I think it's fine. We don't need this ID. We have the ISBN. It's a varchar, title, authors in the plural. And then this can be the primary key. We also have a created that. Created ads. I'm gonna keep this as a timestamp. Not null, default, current timestamp, yeah, that's correct. Primary key is this, which can also be and should be unique, right? And then I'm just gonna, yeah, the engine UTF-8, InnoDB, yeah. Then this is the books created, the other table. Let's see if GitHub Copilot does, yeah, so the highlights. Let's go ahead. Let's see if he can actually generate all the highlights. So I have the ID in this, so the SBN, it's wrong. We don't have contact, so yeah, this is already some data that he doesn't know about. So the text, actually the text can be a text because I'm afraid that there's a highlight that might have more than 250. So I'm gonna keep it as a text, I think it should be fine. Then we have the location. Let me just open here the types, so I don't do this from the heads. Location, we have the create that, the same as that one. Note, the note also should be a text, I think. And we have user ID. It should be unsigned and not null. The book ID, which of course it's a varchar. This could be even less characters. I think it should be around 50, but yeah, I'll just keep it like this for now. And this is it. Now this foreign key is wrong. It's the book ID. First is the user ID, which references users, doesn't exist yet. And it's going to be ID. And then the book ID foreign key as well. That's done. And then finally, let's create the book, the users. So it should be on the top because both of those, at least the highlight depends on that table. So the foreign key creation is gonna fail. So the order matters here. And we have the email. Create that. We have the first name, which I think it can be null. I don't mind it. Or no, let's keep it not null because then the template could be messed up. Right, so I think this is done, right? So we have the creation of those three tables and we return the database as well. Yeah, so we have, I think we have a database later and we can actually test this. Let's go ahead and do a make run because we haven't run the application in a while. Make run. So we got access denied, so something is wrong with the configuration. Let me see. All right, so I've managed to fix. It was basically GitHub Copilot assumed that the password was different, but yeah, this is my password, and then the address needs to have the host and the port as well. That was it. So it's running and it's working because if you go to the database, we have the tables created with no data. Let's create here, for example, a user, user ID 5, and this is default. All right, so if you go back here and try to make a request, I think I have one here already, and I have just went to the form and pasted the JSON file here, and let's see what happens. So I got 404. I see, so this is on the singular and we have it on the plural. So if I hit enter, there we go, we have successfully parsed file. Of course, in the database, there's still no data, right? Because we don't have implementation yet on the storage level for this. So we go here, we create it, but there is no implementation for the create book, just left it empty. As you remember, this is what happens, so nothing happens. Let's fix this. All right, so here on the create book, let's start by implementing this one. I think this is one of the most easiest ones that we can do. Basically, now that we have the SQL connection, we can basically just run an insert here and we're done with it. So let's do an error. db.exec, and then we do an insert into books from the ISBN, title, and authors. It's correct. And then just pass the values, these ones, and like this. Now, if the error is different than nil, we can just return the error and let the clients handle it. So I think this is it for the create book. Then the create highlights, I'm gonna leave this to the end because it's gonna be more complex. So for the get, it's actually pretty simple as well. We do select and then we scan the rows and then just return the book structure. So here we have rows, error, like this. Let's select everything from books where ISBN is equal to the ISBN on the argument. We can just copy the 0 here. It's the same, but I'm going to return the nil book. Doesn't exist. Now we need to I don't think we need to close it right now, because what we're going to do is scan, and if we scan, let me see here on the documentation, if we scan it, the set rows, if next is called and returns false, there are no further results, then the rows are closed automatically. So what we're going to do here is actually, let's initialize an empty book, and I'm going to scan this for all of the rows, and we can do this. I usually like to create this into a function, but I think it's not going to give us much value right now, because this is the only place we're going to scan the book as of now. Just need to make sure that the structure is correct according to the table. So we have the title, we have ISBN, title, and authors, ISBN, title, and authors. That seems correct. And at the end, we just return nil, or we can even just return the book. I'm returning here. No, I'm gonna return here. I prefer to do this. Yep. So that is for the book. Now for the highlights, we need to send bulk highlights. So we need to create this into a transaction, right? And to do that, let me see what we can do. So let's begin it. And if there is an error for some reason, let's just return the error. I'm gonna defer the rollback already, so we don't forget, it's very important. And then let's have, just gonna create the query, which is going to be this. I think we did in this manner, and the values, right? Actually, now that I'm thinking about, let me do something different than Copilot is suggesting. We can do this, and then I'm gonna have an open space here. Let me see if this makes sense. So we're gonna loop over the highlights, and then we're gonna insert this query. So we have query. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do this, but it's how I'm going to do. This is going to be out of here, values, and then I'm just gonna join all of this. So I don't even think we need the transaction for this, right? We don't need a transaction for this. I'm gonna close the transaction, remove it, and then I'm gonna have values, the actual values, append it like this. And basically, all we need to do at the end is remove. Yeah, we can do this. So basically, we want to remove the last comma, because it's going to be here and it is not valid SQL. We need to remove it, and then just execute it. If there's an error, let's handle it. And that should be it. Now, if there was a transaction, we'd commit it here, but I think it's fine, because it's going to be an atomic operation. This is wrong because it needs to be in the single line, like this. Now there's an error somewhere with the values. Oh, we didn't have created the values yet, right? So values should be, I'm gonna make this an array of interface, like this, just so it's anything, right? And with this, if you go ahead and make run, let's hit our endpoint and see what happens. So we have an error already. So creating data from raw book. I see, yeah. We're missing closing comma here, parentheses. Let's try again. We get another error. So the problem here is actually a bit more tricky. It's on the service layer because this is running and it's not creating the book, right? So this is failing here, this logic here. I think it's not the best. And what I can do for now is here, right? Because it's not showing an error if it doesn't exist. And what we can do is return an error, right? So if actually outside of here, if the ID of the book, if book.id or ISBN is empty string, do this and fmt.rf book not found. Does this work? Let's see. Send, and there we go, right? That was the error. And if you go back to the database, we have a book created and we have a bunch of highlights. So we have around 200 highlights created for my user, and this is all of the text. So as you can see, pretty much we have a parsing, so we can parse the files. So this is this part here, so we can actually parse the files. We store them into our storage engine, and then all that's left is send the email and the schedule calling it, right? So we just need to create the other endpoints that the scheduler is going to call. So for this last part, what we need to do is get all the users. So we would have some sorts of new query here on the storage, which would be get users. We get all the active users. We just call this get active users, and we have like this. Then we would loop over all those users and get random highlights. So for example, 3 highlights, 4 highlights for all of those users randomly. And then we build an email and send to them, right? So we would have, for example, get random highlights. This could be an integer of the amount of highlights. And there we go, some highlights as an array. So we could create here just an empty structure. For now, return nil. And the same for this one here. Let's just make the interface not break. And yeah, this is pretty much it, guys. So I'm gonna keep the video to this point here and keep connected if you want to see the email sending, because that's going to be on the next video. I'm going to keep these 2 parts separated. So if you want to keep following along, make sure that you're subscribed. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it gave you value, let me know. See you.